With the serial killer, they've enjoyed the power over life and death, and they want to relive that again.
The first time I did a shot of dope, it was the best feeling I ever had in my life.
Psychopaths are known for their lack of empathy, but when this trait combines with a talent for crime, their psyche becomes twisted, making us question the depths of their minds and the shocking motives behind their actions. So here are 10 disturbing interviews with psychopaths.
I was raised to do time. I wasn't raised to live out there in that world.
It's 1992, and 19-year-old Fabian Witherspoon was on her way to see a friend in Charleston, West Virginia, when she encounters a man holding a sign that read, "I will work for food." Feeling sympathetic after he showed her a photo of his supposed wife and kids, she invited him to her home to give him some food. But once inside, this man pulls out a knife, locks the door, and attempts to sexually assault her. Fabian fought back by grabbing a knife from her kitchen and stabbed him multiple times in his torso, and even sliced his testicles. He eventually knocked her out with a stool, but she woke up in the hospital, being informed that her attacker was one of America's most sinister serial killers, Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Sells was already a hardened killer before the incident with Witherspoon. The man had killed dozens of people across the U.S., with one of his most horrifying killings involving the Dardeen family. Tommy, after being invited over for dinner, killed Russell Keith Dardeen, and killed his pregnant wife before proceeding to beat his daughter to death. His methods of killing were as random as the people he targeted. However, on December 31st, 1999, after one incident in which Crystal Searles narrowly escaped death following the brutal sexual assault and murder of her friend, Kayleen Katie Harris, whose throat was slit and whom he stabbed 16 times, Tommy was finally apprehended. He was sentenced to death row, where his infamy persisted even behind bars.
When people enter my life, they get hurt.
In this exclusive interview with ABC News, we gain a deeper insight into Tommy's psyche and the thoughts that drove his years of senseless murders. He starts by blaming his killings on the guy who molested him during his childhood.
I think every time I killed that guy that molested me all them years.
Tommy's childhood might have not been perfect, but authorities don't believe him being molested was the trigger in his spiral into the abyss. It is believed that Tommy began drinking alcohol at the age of 7, and by 10, he was heavily using marijuana. He met an older man who he got into a relationship with, but at the age of 13, his family abandoned him in the middle of the night, leaving him off to fend for himself. As he grew older, Tommy became addicted to killing people, and he just couldn't stop.
I don't have an on and off switch. I'm just after that drug. I'm after that feeling.
He said he preferred a knife to a gun because that way he could watch in real time as life got snuffed out of his victims.
I like to use a knife. A gun is too violent, too noisy, but just fit my hand well.
And the most disturbing part of this interview was when he asked what it felt like to take a life. He said,
"I don't have no feelings no more. I like to watch the eyes fade, the pupil fade. It's just like setting their soul free."
And after the December 1999 incident, Tommy walked the cops through the crime scene.
Open the window all the way up, well, about like this, and that's how it is. Okay.
But in April 2014, his life was brought to an end as he was executed by lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. For many, death marks an end. But for Tommy, it was the start of a journey he had long desired.
I suffer more here than I'll ever suffer in that grave. I have to live with it every day now. When they kill me, at least I'll be free then.
Paris Bennett is a diagnosed psychopath, and with an IQ of 141, he's considered a genius.
February 4th, 2007, Paris Lee Bennett stood over her sister Ella as her blood pooled around her tiny body and soaked her pink pajamas. His mom was out working that night and got a babysitter to care for her kids, but somehow Paris manipulated this sitter into leaving. Then he would enter Ella's room before 11:30 p.m., stabbing her a devastating 17 times. After the incident, he called 911 and tried feigning insanity, also claiming Ella was a demon. He then pretended to perform CPR as instructed by the dispatcher, but around midnight, the cops would arrive at his home, and he was arrested and charged with capital murder. Despite being only 13, he was sentenced in juvenile court to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. At 19, he was transferred to an adult facility where he sat for a disturbing interview with Pierce Morgan, an interview that left many shocked at the brilliant yet twisted psyche of Paris Lee Bennett.
Can you rationalize or explain now how you came to do what you did to your sister?
I don't think I can easily explain everything, because if I could, we wouldn't be talking about it 12 years later.
Paris made it known that his anger toward his mom made him do what he did.
That is what you were hoping to achieve by your actions. So I'm just curious whether the reality of what you hope to achieve lived up to your expectation or hope.
And to put this into context, his mother, Charity Bennett, believed her own mother killed her dad when she was much younger. This pushed young Charity into a drug addiction, which she partially overcame after birthing her 2 children. However, she relapsed, and this made Paris want to hurt her. He initially wanted to murder her, but instead chose his sister because he believed her death would haunt his mother for the rest of her life.
Do you remember what happened after the emergency services turned up at the house?
I remember that a male officer walking past me into the bedroom, and I remember hearing him mutter, "Oh my God," when he saw what I had done. And I remember, I just felt like I was drowning in shame, knowing that they saw what I had done and knew that I had done it.
Now, is this guy a psychopath? I mean, that might sound like a very stupid question to ask given he literally murdered his own sister, but for Paris, he doesn't think he is. And here's his answer when he was asked that.
Yes, I did commit a monstrous crime, but does one mistake define my entire life? And does that one mistake mean that I'm at the extreme end of the spectrum? I don't think it does.
Now here's the thing. Despite his crime and his sentence, Paris might be eligible for parole, and it just seems like he has everything figured out in order to sway the court in his favor.
I can tell you with complete conviction that I refuse to ever do anything like what I did to my sister ever again. And I know myself well enough to know now that if I ever did lose control again, I would be the one I hurt. I would hurt myself. Because I refuse to do something like that again. I refuse to do that to someone else. I refuse to put myself back into prison. The only person I'm dangerous to is myself. Because at the moment, the very moment that I feel the chains slipping and the bars bending, the very moment that I detect that dark part of myself coming back out again, I would remove myself from the equation.
Well, Paris is eligible for parole in February 2047, and if he's granted parole, he'll be released that same month. So do you think he's really a changed man, or is this just some psychotic plot to get back his freedom and unleash the monster within?
He evidences many of the traits of really strong psychopaths. If you can kill your little sister in a really horrific way, then literally anybody can be your target.
Do you think you deserve to be in prison?
Yes and no. I just felt like I wanted to strangle my mom because of what she did.
So are you a killer?
That's Diane Stoldt lying to a detective about how she and her daughter psychopathically orchestrated the cold-blooded murder of their entire family. By June 2013, the Stoldt family in Springfield, Missouri just seemed to be under some type of curse. Diane's husband, Mark Stoldt, and her son died in the span of 5 months. Investigators searched far and wide to know the cause of their deaths, but the murderers were right with them all along. Diane and Mark lived in Missouri with their 4 children. However, 2 of them had varying special needs. Their 26-year-old son, Sean, had autism, and their 9-year-old daughter had learning disabilities. This made Diane emotionally drawn to her second daughter, Rachel. It was obvious Rachel was her favorite, as Diane posted her pictures on Facebook frequently, also singing her praises to anyone who cared to listen. In April 2012, Mark Stoldt was found dead in his home, and just 5 months later, their autistic son, Sean, also wound up dead. While the family was still grieving both losses, Diane Diane's third daughter, 24-year-old Sarah, was hospitalized, as doctors said all her organs had collapsed, but by some miracle she survived. Although she sustained permanent physical and neurological damages, this all didn't make any sense. And while their entire neighborhood was still in shock, some noticed that Diane wasn't grieving. In fact, quite the opposite. She was posting pictures on Facebook and even planning a vacation to Florida. Medical examiners then discovered that all three incidents had a similarity: no probable cause for the damage except poisoning. So, on June 20th, 2013, Diane was taken in for questioning. Initially, she talked about how her daughter might have died.
She's talked about in the past about cutting her wrist, but as far as other ways, I have no clue.
But then she found humor when discussing the probable cause of her daughter's accident.
I don't...
Could you even hurt yourself from soap or Lysol? Do you know?
I have no clue.
Okay.
I don't even think about it.
Normally, it's difficult for a grieving mother to laugh about what could have killed her daughter in such a manner, but not Diane. And the detective noted that. And being trained to exploit such behaviors, he made it clear that they already had their suspicions and tried getting a confession out of her.
I knew they were drinking antifreeze, and I was so mad at them, I didn't want to take them in.
Now, this is where Diane's psychopathic skills come into play once again. She claimed she was aware that they were taking antifreeze, whereas she had poisoned them for weeks with that chemical. She mixed it into Mark's sports drink, which he regularly consumed, and then into Sean's favorite soda. She eventually confessed her crimes, and the reason for her actions were just as brutal as the acts themselves. Diane made it known that Mark was lazy, and that his income wasn't enough to care for the family. Plus, she hated his guts whenever he was angry. As for Sean, Diane saw him as a pest, as he would always be in the house, finding it hard to socialize with anyone due to his autism. Now, as for her daughter Sarah, Diane claimed she wanted to kill her off in a bid to avoid paying off her student loan debt. She rushed Sarah to the hospital because she didn't want the house to smell bad if she died in it. Keep in mind that at this time, Diane had already used Mark's $20,000 life insurance policy money to purchase a new home with her remaining two daughters. Now, Diane didn't implicate her daughter Rachel, but when authorities searched their home, they uncovered a journal Rachel kept months before anyone had died. In one entry dated all the way back to June 13th, 2011, Rachel wrote, "It's sad when I realized how my father will pass on in the next 2 months. Sean, my brother, will move on shortly after. It'll be tough getting used to the changes, but everything will work out." During her first interrogation, she denied knowing anything about the poisoning, confessed to being an accomplice. In 2015, she pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree assault, and as part of a plea deal to testify against her mother in court, she was handed a life sentence with the possibility of parole, while Diane was sentenced the following year to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Did you kill your mother?
Yeah.
Did you kill her?
She wasn't taking care of my family.
It's August 10th, 2012, and Zachary Davis is in a fit of madness, killing his mother with a sledgehammer and tried to burn down the house while his older brother was still inside. Now, back in 2007, after his dad, Chris Davis, died from ALS, Zachary's mental health would take a turn for the worse. His mom pulled him out of therapy and moved the family to Sumner County, Tennessee, hoping for a fresh start. She had worked as a paralegal and trained as a triathlete, trying her best to move on from her husband's death and keep her boys happy. But little did she know Zachary was slipping into a dark place. He often spoke with this monotonous whisper and wore the same hoodie to school every day. He had this app about serial killers, and he was listing torture devices. His notebooks were filled with disturbing stories and drawings. And on one fateful day, Zachary finally gave in to those voices in his head. By the time they got back, Zachary had packed his clothes, notebooks, a toothbrush, gloves, a ski mask, and a claw hammer in his backpack. It might have seemed like he was planning an escape, but it was something way more sinister. His mother, Melanie, went off to bed at 9 p.m., but while she was asleep, Zachary grabbed a sledgehammer from their basement and went into her room. He bludgeoned her nearly 20 times in the head, till her body stopped moving and her brain splashed everywhere. So now covered in her blood, Zachary went to the game room and soaked his clothes in whiskey and gasoline before setting him on fire. He then took his backpack and ran away, but his actions were going to come back to haunt them. Zachary's brother Josh woke up to the fire alarm and went to rescue their mother. Unfortunately, when he opened the bedroom door, he saw a bloody mess, a sight that would surely traumatize anyone. Josh escaped the fire to a neighbor's house, while Zachary was found by authorities nearly 10 miles away. He was arrested and convicted of his mother's murder, but while serving his sentence, Zachary gave numerous interviews as people struggled to understand why anyone would kill their own mother in such a gruesome manner. In this one particular interview with Dr. Phil, viewers finally heard Zachary's deep and frightening voice and the eerie things he had to say. At one point, he explained how the voice of his late father told him to kill his mother. And if you think that's crazy, he literally laughed while describing the sound the sledgehammer made when it hit his mother's head.
I could just hear the hammer hitting her head.
And what did it sound like?
There was this wet thumping sound.
We don't even know what to make of that, but right now, Zachary Davis is serving a life sentence. And in the words of Dr. Phil, he's young and maybe he can still turn his life around.
And so they show your phone going to Springfield, Missouri on the 23rd, I believe. 22nd, 23rd. Can you help me explain that?
Not Missouri. I went to Mount Vernon.
That was the moment when 27-year-old Levente's lies caught up with him. He had lied to the detective about his whereabouts following his mother's death. It's October 25th, 2018, and law enforcement finds 64-year-old Athena Valentini dead in her home after her co-workers call 911 to report her absence from work. Athena, a registered nurse living in Grover Beach, California, worked at the California Men's Colony State Prison and was beloved by many. However, her peaceful life had tragically come to an end, leaving the cops to investigate the crime scene and piece together what had happened. Now, they noticed her cell was nowhere to be found in her home, and chargers were plugged into sockets, but none of her devices could be seen. The Grover Beach Police Department then obtained a permit to cross-check her call logs from her cell carrier. This would take a few days to be granted, but once it was, the real investigation began. Through call logs and the testimony of a few friends, the cops figured out that Valentini had a son named Lazar. They also uncovered some damning evidence against Lazar, indicating that he had driven over 2,400 miles from his apartment in Bloomington to Athena's condo in Grover Beach, just a day before her body was discovered. Additionally, when Athena's will was revealed a few weeks after her death, it named Lazar as the primary beneficiary of her retirement account. Immediately, he began inquiring about the value of her condominium in Woodland Hills, LA. Plus, the search history on his phone was filled with topics related to murder and inheritance, such as whether the murderer could inherit properties and how probate worked in murder cases. Now, back to the call logs they obtained. It's October 23, 2018, 2 days before Valentini was killed. Lazar purchased a burner phone because his smartphone was linked to a video game that would have tipped off his girlfriend on his location. He lied to her that he was attending a Chicago stock trading conference with his father, when in reality his dad had died years ago when he was much younger. And when he got to his mom's residence, security footage captured him arriving at her doorstep around 6 p.m. and leaving shortly before midnight. And it turns out that burner phone called Valentini multiple times that night. So as the prime suspect, Lazar voluntarily spoke with investigators at the Bloomington police station, waiving his Miranda rights. He gave the detective a fabricated account of the events before his mother's death. He would deny any visit to California after January 2018 and claim never to have purchased a burner.
With those two phones and maps directly from your house on the 22nd to your mom's house on the 24th.
I can promise I was not.
Okay.
I was not in California.
Okay, listen to me.
But the biggest mistake he made was not being aware of the surveillance cameras at his mom's home.
There's video surveillance cameras on your mom's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that?
I did not.
The video surveillance cameras show you going into your mom's apartment when she was murdered. Okay? So what I'm here to do today to talk to you is about, I already know that you're the one that went there. okay? I need you to help me understand why you did this to your mom.
When confronted with the evidence, he twisted that story by claiming he purchased that burner while traveling to sell marijuana in California.
Okay, why did you buy that phone?
Personal reasons.
Like what?
Personal reasons.
Can you explain that to me? Tell me that you drove
For
64 hours
for 15 grams of weed.
for $100 worth of weed.
I know what it sounds like.
Well, it sounds like Lazar isn't such a smart liar. He claimed that he wanted to surprise his mom and retrieve a ring to give to his girlfriend.
I asked my mom for her engagement ring so I can use it as a promise ring.
So at this point, the detective believed his conflicting statements pointed to money and his girlfriend as his motives, since he was reportedly burdened with student debt and struggled financially due to his poor investments. It was alleged that Lazar sought to expedite his inheritance and liquidate his mother's assets to pay off his debts before marrying his girlfriend. Now, for a psychopath, he wasn't a very smart one, and consequently, he was arrested on a murder charge, found guilty in court, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And throughout this legal battle, Lazar not once admitted to the murder. And I mean, to a normal person, his lies were almost believable.
I have no criminal record. I've never done anything bad in my life. So it doesn't make sense for me to go from 0 to 60.
I took her down to my room, which is the basement. And we just watched SpongeBob, and she said she wanted to paint with me. I took out a knife. It's very disturbing.
So if you've ever wondered what a real-life psychopath looks like, look no further. Keith Randulich's actions and his description of what he did to his younger sister will leave you shocked to your core. It's May 22nd, 2009. A teen in Makina, Illinois calls 911 telling the dispatcher to come over quick before he hung up. Now, this teen was 17-year-old Keith Randulich. Keith was a senior straight-A student at the Lincoln Way East High School. He had two brothers and a sister named Sabrina Clement. Sabrina was just 4 years old at the time, and just like every other household, their parents left with one of Keith's brothers to attend a function that evening. So Keith, his sister, and his older brother were left home alone, and this gave Keith the opportunity to manifest the depraved and psychopathic thoughts he harbored toward his sister. So after washing the dishes in the kitchen, Keith armed himself with a steak knife and concealed it in his hoodie's front pocket. He then took Sabrina, who was dressed in blue and pink pajamas, into their home basement to watch SpongeBob SquarePants, while their brother remained upstairs playing a wrestling video game. A few minutes later, he told Sabrina to lay down and uttered the words, "I love you," before bringing out that knife to slit her throat while she screamed. He stabbed her a lot, drenching himself in her blood. The attack was so vicious that Keith almost decapitated her lifeless body. But the true horror of this story was Keith's supposed motive for this murder.
Getting ready to graduate? I was. How you doing in school? I was gonna graduate.
After the cops got to the house, Keith was already outside waiting. He was taken in for questioning, and right off the jump, he used past tense when describing his graduation, making those detectives assume he was already admitting guilt. Then he told those detectives that he had planned to buy a gun after obtaining a firearm permit, and planned to use that gun to kill his sister's abuser. He also claimed that this supposed abuser was someone within his family.
You confronted your parents about multiple occasions for like the past 2 years.
But after his mom denied him from purchasing that gun, Keith decided to murder Sabrina to protect her from further abuse.
I would never have did it, but I just wanted to protect my little sister from my...
Now, this didn't make any sense because investigators found no evidence of sexual abuse in her autopsy. On the contrary, there were more disturbing things found in Keith's room, like horror films, clown masks made of rubber, and death metal music. Keith eventually pled guilty to first-degree murder, and although prosecutors wanted to nail him to the cross with a life sentence, Keith was handed a lesser sentence of 40 years imprisonment.
Why is it that everything that we get from you is yes, no, or I don't know?
I don't know.
Now, the interrogation of Steven McDaniel is one that seems to be taken straight out of a horror movie, and you'll find out why in a moment. At 4:30 a.m. on June 26, 2011, 25-year-old Steven breaks into the apartment of his neighbor and fellow Mercer University Law School graduate, 27-year-old Lauren Giddings, using a master key. He would then strangle her to death, her body with a hacksaw in the bathtub and proceed to hide her body parts from the cops. But while this case was completely shocking, it might interest you to know that there's an even more troubling story behind Steven's actions. Now, Steven was that odd guy that no one talked to or hung out with. He grew up in Atlanta, but moved to Macon, where he graduated from Mercer University Law School. Lauren Giddings also graduated from that same school, and they both lived in an apartment complex near the campus. However, while Giddings was preparing for her upcoming bar exam, Steven was preparing to kill her. Now, Steven didn't have much luck with women and often posted his hatred and desire to torture them on internet forums. He said he was a self-proclaimed virgin saving himself for marriage, yet he seemed to have a disturbing obsession with Lauren. Other neighbors say they never spoke to each other, and quite frankly, she couldn't care any less about his existence. But as the lease to his apartment was set to expire in the coming weeks, he decided the time was right to put an early end to her promising future.
The last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
That was Steven posing as a concerned neighbor during an interview with WGXA news station. And as innocent as he looks, his demeanor quickly changes when he's told that Lauren's body had been found.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. So that's why we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
Now, that behavior, coupled with the fact that Steven didn't allow cops to search his apartment, made him a suspect in the case. He was taken down for questioning, and that's when the real psychopathic behavior surfaced.
Did you used to work at the district attorney's office in Macon?
Yes.
Was you on the prosecutor side or the defense side?
Prosecutor.
So you were on our side?
Yes.
Right. You never worked on the other side?
No.
Did you like it when you were down there?
Now, the first thing we noticed from this interrogation is how eerily still Steven was. He gave the detective a death stare and answered only with the words, yes, no, and I don't know. I mean, this dude said, I don't know so many times I'm not sure I want to hear anyone say it for the next week.
I didn't do anything.
You saw Lauren last night, though? Yesterday?
No.
What time was it that she went out to do her laundry?
I don't know.
Where were you at yesterday?
But after a few more hours of Steven giving the same answers, he confessed to stealing condoms from his neighbors, allowing law enforcement to hold him down on burglary charges. He also had Lauren's underwear in his apartment, and that's one of the reasons he didn't give him permission to go in. In 2014, he finally pled guilty to murdering Lauren and was handed a life sentence. He's appealed his sentence multiple times, and though his earliest time for parole is in 2041, authorities are certain he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Like that.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
I use my feet to push the PVC.
You got each piece of PVC, so now the rope is just around Jimmy's neck.
Yeah, but he was already trying his best to push me off.
Angela Stoldt, known as the neighbor from hell, murdered, cut up, and cooked her neighbor's body parts in a pot. What's even more troubling is her mental state during her police interrogation. Now, Angela was born in Bangkok, Thailand to a military family, and just like most military families, she moved around a lot. From birth, she suffered from a thyroid condition, making her susceptible to higher levels of anxiety and also prone to higher levels of depression. This would make it hard for Angela to find friends in almost every city she lived in. She did get married 3 times and had 2 children from 2 separate fathers. And just when it seemed like she was getting a grip on her life, living peacefully with her 3rd husband, a man named James Schaefer came into the picture. Now, James was a limo driver originally from Philadelphia. He was living in the same neighborhood as Angela while staying with his girlfriend of 17 years and their 3 children. Now, being neighbors, James and Angela became close, with their children always hanging out with each other. But let's fast forward to 2011, and Angela's 3rd husband abandons her, leaving her dead broke. She partially lived off of Social Security checks for her medical issues issues, but James, who had other money issues, found a way he and Angela could both make some quick money. So James had this monthly $1,200 disability check for depression. However, he didn't have a bank account where this check could go. He then contacted Angela to be a payee for his Social Security account, and in turn, he would give her a small compensation of $100. The two went about this for a year and a half before James suddenly disappeared. His family reported him missing, with authorities finding text messages he sent to one of his children, telling him that they might never see him again. It got really weird, but more puzzling was Angela's reaction to being questioned by the cops. She didn't speak, nor did she try to give useful information, making her a prime suspect in this case. About 2 weeks later, Angela's sister called the cops, telling them that her sister was losing her mind. Well, cops responded by taking Angela down to the station, and that was the moment she decided to speak. During her interrogation, she made it known that James was in huge debt. He gambled more money than he could borrow or make, and so he constantly overdrew his account and used up all his income. So, on the night he disappeared, he had come begging to Angela to help him get a $4,000 loan from her dying father. She told the detective that she was fed up with his constant appeal for money, making her take him back to her apartment, lacing his drink with drugs that made his muscles weak, and then pretending like she was taking him to her father's house to get cash. Whereas in reality, she was taking him to a cemetery where she claimed she used a rope to strangle him to death. Now, for some reason, the story didn't add up when she narrated it, and even the detective tried practicalizing it with her, but it just ended up being impossible.
My arm like that, I grab it like this, and I grab it like that, and then I put my feet. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
After that, the detective asked how she got rid of the body, to which she revealed the most tragic portion of this entire incident.
I was going to try to cook it to ash.
Cook it to burn to ash, cremate it. And when this didn't work, what did you do next?
I put it in bags.
Okay. Could you try to boil any other body parts?
I don't think so.
When she realized she had to make the body disappear, she took him back to her garage, and using a hacksaw, she cut him into tiny pieces. She then tried cremating everything in an oven, but couldn't, so she baked a few parts, cooked his head in a pot on the stove, and then wrapped the remaining parts into a plastic bag before dumping everything off in another county, with the help of her children. Then she used his phone to send text messages and make very short calls to make it seem like he was alive and on the run. Wow, we don't know what you make of this, but it's arguably one of the most preposterous stories we've ever covered on this channel. But anyway, on December 5th, 2014, Angela was found guilty of James's murder and sentenced to life in prison.
A glimpse into the mind of an accused killer. Devon Arthurs is charged with murdering his neo-Nazi roommates in a Tampa Palms apartment back in May.
May 19th, 2017, Devon Arthurs picks up an AK-47 and shoots his two roommates, 18-year-old Andrew Wunschuk and 22-year-old Jeremy Himmelman, at close blank range in their two-bedroom terracotta condo close to the University of South Florida, which was rented by their fourth roommate, 21-year-old Brandon Russell. His reason? Well, it might just be one of the most mind-blowing things you'll hear today. Now, Arthurs didn't have a job, and most of the time he was just playing video games. He met his three roommates on different forums online for alt-right supporters. All four of them were into the whole red pill stuff, believing that everything concerned with mainstream media was a lie, and let's just say Arthurs took things a little too far, because right after murdering his roomies, he walks into the community's leasing office and tells everyone he had just committed a murder. From there, he wandered to a strip mall smoke shop across the street, waved a gun once inside, and held everyone hostage. But before he could do anything crazy, the police pulled up and took him into custody. Now, during his police interrogation, Arthurs made it known that he co-founded the neo-Nazi group Atomwaffen Division with his roommate Brandon Russell. Then he told the detective the group's troubling purpose.
Now it's like, we're going to be insurgents, we're going to kill as many people as we can,
and then we're going to do this to try to achieve white revolution, as they call it.
So this was a growing problem.
Oh, absolutely. It was growing, and their numbers kept on growing and stuff like that.
How do you think you would have continued to tolerate this or handle this? Do you think you would have been driven out at some point?
I think that I would have definitely been driven out. Like today, I was at my boiling point. I was posted just messaging. I was literally, I had the Skype open, and I was like about to type, like, dude, I'm packing my shit. I'm going back to Orlando. You know, you guys can go fuck off, pretty much. And I was gonna then contact the FBI or some local police to go like that. Like, that would have been me.
Did you, when you converted to Muslim?
Yeah.
All right. They were all aware of that.
Yes.
Did at any point in time, did you reach out for any assistance or any guidance or anything from anybody, like on the internet or chatting or anything, or
no?
Or you just continue to do or listen to what they were doing with their encrypted stuff?
No, I did not. I didn't try to reach. I mean, in hindsight.
And then talked about how the group handled their opposition.
We're talking about people that are embedded with NATO forces, and NATO's not even aware of it. People that literally crucify people and burn them to death in the middle of Ukraine because they're POWs captured by captured.
But how did any of these have to do with him killing his roommates? Well, Arthur converted to Islam, and his newfound religion made him rethink being a part of the whole Nazi boo-ah.
Organization Ukraine, which is an NS movement that crucifies people and has harmed a lot of people, and that came directly from there. These people were not good people.
His roommates mocked him for this, making him angry, and in turn was the motive behind killing him.
These people would laugh about the concept of like blowing up like refugee ships, and they had the explosives, they had the plans, they had the encrypted conversations.
These two individuals or
the entire organization?
But here's the deal. Arthur's testimony to that detective was filled with a lot of things that made it hard for authorities to separate facts from fiction. This guy talked about bombs, wars, and things even the FBI didn't know about. And this might have just been a strategy to delay his case for months, because that's what it would have taken to really get to the root of things. Plus, he began telling law enforcement that they might get into trouble by looking deep into his statements.
Yeah, I'm not trying not to be like an ass or anything. I understand that. It's just like your lives would be in danger too.
Well, we don't know what happened to all that BS he was talking about, but what we do know is that Arthurs initially pled not guilty by reason of insanity, citing his diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder and autism spectrum disorder. However, after being found competent to stand trial in 2022, he eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder in May 2023. He was given 45 years in prison with parole eligibility after 25 years, followed by 15 years of probation. It's 2018, and Florida hairstylist Jolene Cummings disappears, prompting authorities to question her coworker, Jennifer Seibert. Turns out this coworker had been wanted by the FBI for over 25 years. For a little context here, Kimberly Kessler had been working at Tangle's Hair Salon in Fernandina Beach, Florida, for a month, using the alias Jennifer Seibert. She's used over 18 different names while on the run for more than 2 decades, but her coworker and eventual victim, Jolene Cummings, was suspicious of her behavior and promised to expose her for being a fraud. Seibert, or should I say Kessler, wasn't going to let that happen, so she decided to murder Cummings. On May 12, 2018, 34-year-old Cummings was supposed to leave work at 5 p.m., but never made it home, and honestly was never seen again. She was reported missing after failing to pick up her kids from her ex-husband, and being that Kessler, who was still identified by the alias Seibert, was one of the last people to see her alive, she was immediately summoned for questioning by law enforcement. Now here's the thing. Kessler was smart enough to get rid of Cummings' body, but was completely oblivious in trying to make herself look innocent, and we'll tell you why. When the cops stopped by the hair salon where Kessler worked, she never showed up, and even texted the owner that she was quitting her job. That odd behavior continued after Kessler herself called the cops, informing them that she couldn't be involved in their investigation because she had a stalker ex-boyfriend who would find her if her name appeared on any report. At this point, it was clear she knew something, and was later traced to a parking lot where cops found her sleeping in her car. She was taken down to the precinct for interrogation, and that's when we see some psychopathy come into play. She starts off lighthearted, talking about her son.
And so thankfully, my son is 20 years old now. I haven't seen him since he was 14 months old.
I'm very grateful that his father got to raise him. I did not want him in foster care. It scared me to death. I couldn't even understand why they took him. So that set me on my last 19-year run.
She also talks about how she's trying to get her life back.
I spent, about 25 years running from the FBI and thought I could build a life for myself, and I've done nothing. I've been trying. I've been living in my car for the last.
Psychopaths can be quite conversational, often displaying charm and engaging communication skills. They might use this manipulation tactic to control situations or people to their advantage, and Kessler tried this by mentioning her previous sex work in a bid to seduce both detectives.
I was working as a topless dancer, and that was before my truck driving.
Looks like her plan was working, as one detective, instead of focusing on the case, began making small talk with her.
Well, you just had a birthday.
I just did, yeah.
Okay, mine's in September.
Okay.
So,
my mom was born in September. She was born September 9th, 1948.
My mom's is September 10th.
Really?
But after a while, things take a wild turn when the cops began asking what she knew about Cummings' death. Kessler tried pointing the detectives to the suspicion that Cummings had a drug problem, and maybe that was what killed her.
Was she involved in any bad habits or anything that could get her in trouble?
I can't say that she did, but I did find a bag that I believe had crystal meth in it, just a little bit in the bottom, a tiny baggie back by the back door.
And what's interesting here is that she never altered the tone of her voice, nor did the composure change while she talked. I mean, this woman was either a very good liar, or was just telling the truth. But as it turns out, the former seems to be the more accurate, as investigators found multiple fake documents and IDs, showing that Kessler had used 18 aliases in 33 cities across 14 states since 1996. Cummings' DNA was also found on socks, boots, and scissors in Kessler's car, as well as blood in Kessler's storage unit alongside one of Cummings' fingernails. And if you're wondering why the FBI was chasing her, well, I guess we'll never know. But in September 2018, Kessler was officially charged with Cummings' murder. But while awaiting trial, she went on a hunger strike, dropping to a shocking 89 pounds in this attempt to prove that she was incompetent to stand trial. But despite her skeletal appearance and frequent court outbursts, the judge ruled that Kessler was mentally competent. She also faced battery charges after stripping naked, smearing feces on herself and the cell walls, and even throwing it at guards. And in December 2021, her spree of deceit and destruction ended when she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.